If you like to watch Survivor, and when the show ends, you really want to talk about it with like-minded friends. It might be hard to find some, but don't you shed a tear. Check out the Purple Rock Podcast, and this is what you'll hear. John will make some dumb jokes, and he likes to yell and curse. And if they're not available, the backup hosts are so much worse. We'll spend the whole time being jerks and telling you you're wrong. So we found a nice person to sing you our theme song. It's the Purple Rock Survivor Podcast.
Welcome to the Purple Rock Survivor Podcast. I am John, joined by my co-host, Emma, who was our regularly scheduled co-host for this week. Emma, you must be so delighted to have avoided that horrible topic last week and been in this week's episode instead. What a delight for you.
Yeah, such a great decision on my part to decide to keep the schedule as it was in order to avoid having the race episode and the sexism episode, because that's definitely worked out for me.
Yeah, everything's coming up, Emma. Quick disclaimer up front. We don't censor profanity, and we've said that many times before, but I'm just warning you because I'm guessing there might be a lot of it tonight.
There's gonna be some profanity.
Yeah, there will be some F-bombs.
I'm usually one of the bad ones anyway.
Yeah.
It's gonna be worse.
And it's been 24 hours plus since the episode aired, and still a little pissed though.
Yeah, I'm not at 24 hours yet, so I got that extra fire.
Cool. It's closer for you. The wound is fresher. I probably should have watched it again to take notes and make sure I got all the details right. But luckily, I got to avoid that because my beloved Josh Wigler wrote a whole piece at Hollywood Reporter with tons of quotes from the episode and an interview with Probst. So it spared me from doing that. Wigler, you are a gem. Yeah, I highly recommend reading that just because it's good to see those things in print and the Probstian responses to Wigler's very poignant questions. Well done, as always, for Josh Wigler. So one thing I feel like I should start off with is that we've said a couple times in recent seasons that if you are looking for Survivor to be better than society at large and to have better outcomes than you would expect in society, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. And man, was this a reflection of society at large.
Yeah, I guess we got burnt by our own guidance there, because I guess maybe you expect it to be a little bit better.
I mean, I'm not surprised. We'll get to the votes and stuff, but after seeing the disclaimer up front, it was probably about halfway into the episode, and I think Kelly was finding an idol, and I went, oh no. Like, it all came together in my head, what was going to happen, and I went, oh shit. That's why we have the disclaimer. She's going to be the one that goes home, and they're like essentially doing an ass covering move so it doesn't look like she went home because she spoke up, and like, it was just, the depression hit then, and it was just a solid 45, 60, 90, whatever minutes it was after that of just slow burn horribleness.
And lucky me got to know about the warning at 5 o'clock Western time and just have that anxiety spike right until we get to 8 o'clock and actually have to watch the episode. So it's just a great evening all around.
Yeah, primed for disappointment. There's actually been several people that we know that were, delayed in some way in watching the episode or getting to it for various reasons. And I think the general consensus was, you know what? You don't have to. It's totally fine to skip this one. You can sit it out. You can read a summary if you really need to, but it's cool, man. No one's going to judge you if you skip it. And I don't know how many of them embrace that or not.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure as of this recording, our pal Andy has still not watched it. So, just keep an eye on that Twitter feed because you're going to see some rants.
Oh, man. Of all things to be behind on.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So plenty of points of outrage to discuss this evening. I did a terrible fucking job of making a breakdown for this episode. And part of it is just like, I stayed upset every time I read this stuff. And it was like, I couldn't focus on writing a coherent breakdown of the episode. So you're probably going to have weird tangents and it's not going to be super coherent, but we're going to do our best here.
We're trying. What do you want from us?
Yeah, exactly. So why not start with the terrible stuff, right? Before we get into like any chronological type breakdown of the episode, because we all know what happened.
Yeah. I think there's no way to try to address any of like actual quote unquote strategy without kind of hitting that elephant in the room first. And cause it's a big fucking elephant.
It is. Yeah, that's the thing. It would just feel like you were dancing around it if you tried to say like, well, we'll get to that later. Like, nah, it's kind of the fucking central focus of 2 hours of this show that we enjoy. So, the first person that I had written down to, talk about was Lauren. She's the one that I don't have a direct quote from. I do have the quotes from the other people, but that one didn't Lauren's didn't happen to be in the Josh Wigler article. But to paraphrase, it was something along the lines of, hey, Dan never did anything bad to me. How did that make you feel as a woman to hear that resounding support? Have you ever, witnessed something like that from any other women?
I mean, haven't we all? Also, what's interesting is she said that, and then in her apology, and I'm sure we'll get to the grand apology tour 2019 in due time, she talks about how she had her own issues with Dan. So wait, did Dan did do anything to her? And that she addressed it and it stopped. But like, then there was something.
Yep. And also, I believe she was the one in the last episode that was joking about, Dan's handsiness at night. I think she was in that group, right?
Yeah, I believe she was definitely on that tribe. And I do remember her and, Elizabeth and Missy talking about that, the whole like, I think Lauren was even the one who was like, don't feel violated and like did the grabbing, which I'm not sure, but at the time I was interpreting that as like her, as herself telling the other woman who I'm pretty sure was Elizabeth, like, don't feel violated as I demonstrate. Not like that was what Dan was saying, but it's right. Like, don't feel violated as I show you how we are all being violated.
Right, exactly. And that's how I read it too. But now I'm wondering, like, is that actually a thing that he might have said and she was quoting? Oh, terrible things to think about. An incredibly bad look for Lauren. As you mentioned, she, as did pretty much everyone involved in this issue, weirdly, seemingly coordinated apology and a lot of similar details in all of the various apologies, although some, I will say, seemed a lot more sincere than others.
Yeah, definitely one, and I think what we're talking about too is like the most notable exception was both much earlier and in a different format. And that's very interesting to me because if it is sort of like people are positing that, this is CBS or like a PR team kind of, or like them all working together, like to me that seems like Aaron, which is who I'm talking about. Did he stray from the group? Did he do this on their own? And then they were all like, oh shit, we gotta apologize. Like, I'm just very curious on how that went because his really stands out as being both, much earlier in the day being a video or, two videos, the phrasing is much different. So I'm just curious about that, but we'll probably never know.
Yeah. Screw it. Let's move on to Aaron. Okay. We can always jump back and forth. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So the quote from Aaron, which was in Wigler's article, and this is what he's apologizing for. He said, and I'm quoting here, "What's happening now is the victim role is being assumed by Janet, and now instead of taking responsibility for her actions, she's trying to spin this into something that could potentially affect the life of Dan. If this was truly a general tribal concern, I would have been involved, Tommy would have been involved, and Dean would have been involved." Oh my God. I feel like, you know what, you took the Lauren one because you've seen such behaviors from women. Let me start on this one because I've seen such behaviors from men, and the entire fucking premise of the Me Too movement was to try to inform you that these sorts of situations are far more prevalent than any of us knew because so many people never shared their stories. Like, that was it was really basic thesis. Doesn't seem like it's that hard to get through your head. And just personally, so many of the stories that I've either like read or been told by people that I know, not all of them, but a lot of them start with some version of like, oh, I've never told anyone this, or I don't tell many people this. Like, yes, they don't, because it's fucking hard, and because there's people like Aaron that will not react properly to it. And God, it's so depressing, man. Like, I don't know how many times I can see it. I'm sure that I'm going to keep seeing it. Fortunately, there are some people that are evolving and progressing and wouldn't do such a thing. We'll get to some of them later in the episode. But my God, man, he did have what seemed to me to be a very sincere apology. He looked totally contrite and like he was very affected by seeing how the whole situation played out, how his words and actions looked to someone like Kelly. So congrats to him on that personal growth. But my God, man, there's too many Aarons in this world.
Yeah, and I think some of it is like why his apology is maybe seen as better is because the bulk of it is really like, I am sorry, like, I was wrong, I own up to that, I take responsibility. You know, there's no, I'm sorry if I offended you, you know, yeah. I think, yeah, I think he did, the one moment I sort of clocked is he did have a time saying, like, I'm sorry if it triggered someone, but I think, first of all, like, he is using the term genuinely, so I think that kind of works because you can be offended by it without actually having that, like, trigger an actual experience. So he's saying, you know, like, okay, if there were people out there watching that it made them think back to something, like, you know, I'm even extra sorry for that, which I can kind of get, but you don't have as much of the, like, I didn't have all the information I needed that everyone is saying, which is bullshit that we'll get into later. But speaking of Aaron, though, because, well, yeah, he did apologize and we're glad that he, you know, cleared that low-ass bar of giving a real apology.
Right. Louis C.K., looking at you.
Oh, God. Do we have to?
No. Let's not.
But let's not forget, you know, not only does he have the whole, like, oh, Tommy would have been, like, I would have been involved, there's also his in-tribal defense of, like, I am, you know, I have sisters, I have a mother, I have a wife thing that, like, how is that still being used as an example? Like, we've seen, you know, like, Harvey Weinstein has a wife, Donald Trump has daughters and a wife, you know, like, that is not, like, I am a daughter and a sister and a wife, and I'm not your fucking shield for sexism. That is not how it works. We are people, like, even someone who doesn't know me or, you know, was raised by a single dad and all brothers and, you know, is a bachelor, like, still has to care about women. Sorry, we're still people.
Yeah, that's the other, like, remarkably prevalent defense. And it's pretty fucking clear that
John, as a father of a daughter, how do you feel about that?
Let's not go revealing personal details. I barely even feel comfortable revealing that my first name on this podcast.
You're very rare. Very unusual.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, regardless of being a parent or being a husband, you recognize that it's wrong to treat human beings that way. You don't need the experience of loving a woman in your life. How hard is it to grasp the concept that this person deserves your respect merely because they are human? Like, it is, again, such a low bar. Please just fucking clear it.
Yeah, and I will give one tiny, like, modicum thing, not a defense, but maybe like an understanding of why he said sort of the first, and like was talking about Janet playing, like, taking the victim role or whatever, quote unquote, because that'll lead us to who else we're talking about, is that you know, he met Kelly like 2 days ago. He met Janet 2 days ago. The main people involved in this who he's probably hearing the most from, his closest allies, are Missy and Elizabeth. So I can definitely see someone being told, this is fake, we're playing, this is a game, and believing that because you were there, you know, they're your friends, they're your allies, and so thinking that's what's happening. But obviously you have to also be like, well, they did all, like, wasn't the whole thing that they were coming after Missy and then they did vote for Dan? Like, what's going on there?
Okay,
you know?
So, and to that point, because that is a reasonable defense for him. But at the same time, if you believe the chyrons we saw on the show, or the on-screen text, whatever it was, they had a fucking meeting about this. Like, there was some production intervention. We're not clear exactly what was said to them. Actually, there is a little snippet that I can get to later that Probst revealed. So it was pretty clear that something was going on, unless they were so remarkably inept at delivering that speech that maybe it wasn't clear. And you know what? I won't even discount that, because some people are just terrible at communicating that message. And again, that'll probably come up when I actually read what Probst mentioned. But regardless, if Missy and Elizabeth tell you, hey, we're just playing up a fake allegation against Dan, probably a good idea to be like, hey, that's fucked up. Let's not do that, because...
Don't do that.
Yeah, because you know what? Regardless of it being a game, there are people that would love to have that sort of moment to latch onto and embrace as the example of all their bullshit that they spout, that like women make this up so often when it's actually inordinately rare.
Plus, you can also have, you know, you could also be like, wow, what like a crazy idea. How did you come up with that? Well, Kelly was telling us all that Dan touches her inappropriately. Be like, okay, so maybe she's not making that up.
Yeah. Pause for a moment. Did we ever consider that maybe this is not a story crafted out of whole cloth?
Yeah. So just to be clear, this is not like a, well, it's not to blame at all. Just like the slightest defense, because I can see where the it's the rare case where you can kind of see how the lines got crossed and where the misinformation came from, but it's also like you still had to do better than that.
Yes. I mean, we'll give him some measure of tepid defense, but tepid is about as much as
if we're ranking everybody, you know, it's a game of inches here if we're ranking the horribleness, so.
Yeah.
Gotta take what you can get.
Yeah. Alright, so probably enough about Aaron for now. Let's, I guess, move on to, God, this is just a terribly depressing march through the episode.
Aren't you all glad you're listening to this? Isn't this making your Friday great?
So exciting to get additional content on this particular episode of Survivor. So Elizabeth, next in line, she just had, wow, a hell of an episode. The quote that Wiggler had from her in his article was, just know that we are fine, and some things that I needed to be said to get her the fuck off my back. This was her defense for telling Janet that she had indeed been inappropriately touched by Dan and had asked for her help and backing, and then immediately turns to Dan, reassures him, no, you're fine, buddy. You haven't done anything remotely wrong. And on more than one occasion reassures him of this, and just utter fucking trash. Please, God, recognize that you were having legitimate conversations. Yes, Missy told you to play it up, but there is something there, and it wouldn't have killed you. Even if you were trying to, like, reassure Dan about vote or gameplay or whatever it might have been, to just say, like, you know what, I did play it up, but while we're on the subject, you can get a little handsy and maybe fucking stop that, because you've been told repeatedly at this point, stop it.
Yeah, like if she really, you know, she has said in her confessionals that it, like, doesn't bother her, and obviously that's, like, her prerogative for her personally.
It's her body.
But, like, Yeah, you can say, you know, maybe I saw someone say this maybe because it's like, you know, she's an athlete, she's dealing with training, like, you know, sometimes, obviously we've seen, you know, in other Olympic sports how that can be like horrendously exploited, but maybe, you know, she's just a little more used to, you know, massages, that sort of thing. So for her personally, it doesn't bother her, but like you can be like, hey, like, you know, yeah, it can come off creepy, it can come off uncomfortable. Just know I'm still cool with voting with you. Like, it's not a deal breaker for me, but you probably want to know that going forward with other allies, because it can, like, you know, it could turn people against you. Like, you could phrase it like that. There are things to do if you want to be working with Dan for some godforsaken reason.
You know, if you have a working relationship with someone, there is, and if there's a level of trust, which maybe there is here, I don't want to dive into that relationship, to be honest with you. But if there is some level of trust, and I recall in Heroes versus Villains, Tyson saying to Coach, like, hey man, listen, I like you, but you need to cut it with the fucking weird stuff. Like, people don't like that, you know, and obviously not remotely the same thing, but it is showing how you can approach someone and deliver some criticism to them that might hurt a bit, but it's important that they hear. And it's like, come on, Elizabeth, just fucking step up.
And you know who tried to do something like that?
Tell me.
Our one true queen, Janet.
We're gonna save the Janet stuff for later. And I hate to just say that, but like, it needs to be the palate cleanser at the end. Like, we will rain down praise upon Janet.
Just know we love her so much.
We have no choice but to stand. I'm glad you mentioned the Olympian thing, because there have been some instances in the very recent past of some horrifically bad allegations. Fuck, why call them allegations? They're true. Against...
We ain't lawyers or journalists.
Yeah.
We can say what we want.
Exactly. You don't even know my last name. How are you going to find me, lawyers?
Yeah, come at us, United States Gymnastics.
That's right. My name is Congressman Jim Jordan. Come get me. Anyway.
It's good to laugh.
Hey, coincidental use of a name on that one too, since we're on this topic. Yeah, so there was a big gymnastics scandal, and there were some fellow gymnasts that came forward and said, hey, you know what? This happened to me. There were other gymnasts that later confessed that it happened to them, who initially said, hey man, don't do this. I don't believe you. That's wrong. You shouldn't smear our sport. Like, it's so hard to watch it happen. Like, please, for the love of God, just embrace, at the bare minimum, just shut up. Like, you should support and be like, you know what? I believe this person. We should investigate fully, whatever. But at the bare minimum, shut up. Don't discourage someone from speaking out, because, my God, you are the reason that this continues to happen so often.
Yeah, I happened to watch, I usually watch, these episodes alone, and I happened to be watching this with a couple of friends, and we were...
What a party.
Yep. Yeah, we were all like, I mean, in a way it was good. It was a little more cathartic because we had people to yell with. But obviously Dan is the worst off here, but we were just, all three of us were so horrified and disgusted by Elizabeth's behavior on like so many different levels too. Cause there's the like, I can understand why when Janet came to her and said, we're voting Dan, why they believed that was not true. Just the fact of voting, not any of the other stories, because they had already heard from Lauren that was fake. But then it just turned around and things happened to change that made that actually the story. So I get where that kind of miscommunication came in. But to decide to play up something that you're not experiencing, whereas like, Missy, you know, I don't know, it's so confusing with Missy, but at the very least you're hearing from Missy that Kelly was like, just because they had a conversation and maybe are still targeting each other doesn't mean that the conversation was an entire lie. And then now that she's saying like, oh, it's not real, like, Dan God, it's not like I feel bad for Dan, but now Dan is getting such misinformation from the people still in the game of like, no, it's okay. You're fine. Everything's fine. And he's like, oh, so people are just lying about it? Like, what? And obviously two different things can be true, but like, you can see where that's really confusing. And then you have people watching it who are like, oh, they are lying about this. And that's what leads to like, Aaron saying like, wait, this could affect the life of Dan because he's being told by people that they were making it up or playing it up, and like to know that this is a person who's giving motivational talks to people.
Meaning Elizabeth.
Yeah. Sorry. Elizabeth, and like presumably to, children, teens, probably a lot of girls, is just so disgusting to me. Like it actually makes me sick.
Yeah, it's just so depressing. Quick diversion. I don't think I even wrote down a quote from Missy, but obviously she needs to be discussed here. By the time we got to the second episode with Missy and Elizabeth talking to Dan and playing down the whole situation and, oh, no, you're fine, blah, blah, blah. I legitimately felt like, wait a minute. Am I recalling the first episode correctly when Missy and Kelly had this conversation? Like, I could have sworn I saw Missy volunteering how uncomfortable she felt, how she felt like she was being treated like an object and how that was wildly inappropriate. And hearing Missy talking to Dan, I'm like, wait, was that an act? Were you acting? Do you really believe that? Like, I was so confused by what was going on there.
Yeah, Missy is definitely the one I'm most torn about and most confused about because I think we just saw such disparate things and I think it's easy to be misinterpreted or interpreted in different ways. This is the way I saw it and I could be wrong and I could have missed stuff again with a group and like that sort of thing. The way I saw it or viewed just the Missy arc, if we're just talking about Missy these two episodes, is that Missy and Kelly, meeting for the first time, like end up bonding over this and talking about, yes, I too feel uncomfortable with Dan. Here are my experiences. Here are your experiences. Feels good about this. Wants to work with Kelly. Kelly, while feeling validated about this situation, also is like, okay, but Janet's here and Janet will make it better because Janet makes everything better. But like, so I'm okay. I can, like, it sucks, but like, I will deal with it. I don't want to have this affect my game. So I'm going to target Missy because she's a threat. That gets around to the other Vokai people. So Lauren, who's tight with Missy, tells Missy, hey, but Kelly's voting with you. Why do you think she was talking to you for 2 hours? At this point, I don't know that Lauren knows what the conversation was, just that they were talking. So I don't know if that would have affected things. How will we know? But, so I think at that point, like, she was just trying to make you feel safe. Like, that's the conversation. Now, I think what I don't know is if Missy now thinks that Kelly was not telling the truth. I don't necessarily think that. I think maybe she just feels like, okay, we were talking about this, but also Kelly's using this for a game, so I'm going to target Kelly. So we have to, maybe we can divide that. I can get the votes off me, whatever. And so because she's telling Elizabeth, play it up, not like make it up or something. And
yeah, although even that,
right, it's still
felt
bad.
Pretty gross,
right? Oh, I absolutely agree. I'm just trying to it's just I think her arc is so confusing here that I'm just trying to parse it as much as I can, with the way I'm seeing it happening. So I think at that point, Missy is this is a thing I'm feeling, but I'm gonna I'm gonna try to use this and do the game stuff, which again, bad and icky, but I think, and I'm not sure, that Missy's feelings about Dan were genuine, but being used in a quote-unquote strategic way, whereas I think Elizabeth was never genuine, was just oh, we were just joking about it, you joke about a guy being creepy, but I don't actually think it's that bad. I'm putting up with it. I'm not worried about it. Whereas Missy is I don't like that this is happening, but the game is the only thing that matters to me, so I'm doing that.
Right. That's roughly the track that I ended up on. Although, I mean, as you said, I feel like that could be read a bunch of different ways because it wasn't entirely clear.
I've definitely seen people who like are putting, you know, Missy and Elizabeth on the exact same level, which is fair because they're probably, you know, maybe they're noticing scenes I didn't, or, you know, just it's so messy that it is open to interpretation. But that's the way I viewed it, which for me makes, again, both bad, but like would make Elizabeth worse to me. Not that that's what this is about, but that's just how it seems.
Exactly. So quick talk about Dan. Honestly, there's not a ton that we probably need to say about him. Like, it's painfully freaking obvious that the guy is wrong on so many levels. There was all kinds of stuff in this episode, or these episodes, whatever you want to call it, that you don't normally see. They wanted to make it painfully clear all of the evidence that existed. I mean, we saw Dan like rubbing someone's calf falling on the ground, reaching into Kelly's hair, tickling people's toes, like rubbing Kelly's face was the weirdest thing. Like,
yeah,
there's one person I do that with. That's my wife. And even then, it's not very common. He has known these people for less than 2 weeks at this point, and he's touching faces. That's fucking weird.
Yeah, and like, so much of it is just, I mean, all of it is like unnecessary touching, but at least if it wasn't Kelly who had already reiterated, don't touch me, like the hair thing, you could see it's like, oh, like, I don't know. There's stuff that in a vacuum would be more harmless, but what are you doing? Touching people's toes? What the fuck?
Yes.
And like randomly rubbing their leg. Yeah. Like this is just like weird, unnecessary. It's not, cause especially when at Tribal, when he's like, oh, that's like his apology. Like, it's like, my friend put it as like, oh, he's clearly gone to sexual harassment seminars. Like, he knows what he's supposed to say because he was so close in some of it. And then it's like, oh, but if you feel that like there's not it's too cuddly in the shelter, like there's, oh, I'm touching, like going to walk past and like then demonstrates, which is
gross,
insane. Like, why would you demonstrate on Nora? Like, if you're going to touch anyone, at least have it be like Jamal or something, so it's not like, here, let me touch another woman as I tell you how I'm not inappropriately touching women. And that is way longer of a shoulder touch than you would need to get past someone. That's, and like, also, sure, a shelter might be crowded, but a beach is not, you know? Just fucking walk around someone.
Also, I'm about to blow your mind here. Check this out. Excuse me, can you move? I need to get by.
Wow.
What? Did you hear that shit?
Insane.
I just changed your life right there.
Brand new information. You're an etiquette genius, sir.
That's right.
But yeah, like he's just building in these, like, oh, they're just mad that we have to cuddle in the shelter or whatever, and like, so he's pulling these things that you know happen in Survivor. You do have, like, they do tend to all spoon and cuddle in the shelter for body warmth. That's normal, but there's ways about it that's not normal, and we've seen it before. Like, you know, I mean, even when it's something benign, like, oh, I think those two are in a showman's, you know, versus like, these two are cold. Like we've seen it, obviously, Ted and Gandhi in Thailand. We've seen Jean Robert be like, oh, I need Amanda and Courtney to keep me warm, even though I'm probably way more than both of them combined. And this is not like a Jean Robert, like, this is just like Amanda and Courtney are so tiny.
Right.
Just to be clear, the tiniest, especially Courtney. But yeah, like, you know, Courtney's famous line of like, I'm 7 pounds. I can't keep myself warm. Like,
right.
Yeah, it's such clear bullshit. It's taking advantage of the situation they're in where they need to make body heat and using that to make physical contact with someone you wouldn't otherwise get to.
And more importantly, he says more than once, like, to Probst, we're not going to drop this. Oh, we're just not going to let this die. He continually acts as though this was new information to him, and it was fucking infuriating. Like, he was directly confronted about it at the start of the season.
Yeah.
Like, we saw it take place, And it seemed like at the time, and I mean, it's been a while and I didn't go back and rewatch, but it seemed at the time, I remember thinking like, oh, it seems like he absorbed that conversation pretty well and he apologized. And Kelly, to her credit, put it in ways that it seemed like he would accept. Not that that was her responsibility to do, but it seemed like it worked. And I was like, okay. So he's at least aware that at some point someone had been made uncomfortable. They had a meeting where they specifically told everybody that's playing, hey, this, and this are not appropriate. Don't do those things. And then supposedly a one-on-one meeting with Dan, when Probst confirms this too, in that Wiggler article that I mentioned earlier, Dan was given a very explicit warning and was surprised to receive that warning. Fuck?
And then, okay, like, even giving way more benefit of the doubt than we should, it's like, okay, maybe he thinks, well, except he was, but like maybe in the premiere
exactly.
he thinks.
There's already holes in your theory. You haven't even gotten your
and
first
again, to be clear, this is not like an actual thing. This is like, if we're being as generous as possible, which we're not, you could see like, okay, in the premiere, he thinks Kelly really is just like a germaphobe. So it's just a Kelly, it's just like, okay, no more touching of Kelly. But he was, and like, so now it's a surprise that other people are having issues. Except we still saw evidence that he was touching Kelly.
Yes.
Also, then he was surprised again when Janet brought it up and was like, hey, that talk we had, so we know that the meeting existed, that was about you. Like, he had that warning. Like, so then to be, like, fine, if after the 10 days or however long since Kelly first brought it up, he's like, oh, I didn't know that was still being a problem, because she'd also been like, we just met, like, oh, maybe when we get to know each other. So if he's that dense and, like, think it's fine, but then you get the warning and you should be like, oh, shoot, that's still an issue. Oh my God, I can't believe this was happening. Okay, like, I'm gonna be so careful now. But instead is somehow, and like, then it would be like if Janet came to him, you'd be like, oh man, like, okay, I knew there was something, I didn't realize it was as bad, like, I didn't realize it was that bad. Okay, I'm gonna be so much more careful now. Not like, what do you mean? This is the first I'm hearing about it, not the third, definitely not the third time.
It's not like I've been repeatedly told about this in the less than 2 weeks that I've been here. So he's got this body of evidence that he has committed some sort of, or he's crossed some sort of line. Like, you should absorb that. You can't continually be surprised. Like, I think you mentioned that he's not fucking Dory from Finding Nemo. He should have absorbed at some point, like, hey man, I think I might need to reconsider how I behave around here. 'Cause it seems like this subject has come up more than once.
Yeah, definitely. It's just, like, if nothing else, this is a game where you need people to like you to vote for you. So you should probably try to make them feel comfortable.
Yes. And sure, to a very specific subset of people, gently rubbing their face might make them feel comfortable. I don't think that subset of people includes people that you met less than 2 weeks ago. So I want to quickly sort of like bring up, because I mentioned, that they had this meeting. In that article that Wiggler wrote, he asked Probst basically, what was said at this meeting. And it's kind of relevant to the next point that I'm going to get to. So I'll read that now. Probst said they had a meeting with all the players. And he said, this is a quote, "We covered everything from inappropriate jokes to respecting bathroom breaks, privacy to change clothes and touching in any way, including seemingly little things like brushing sand off someone's face." This is just my theory. I think that's counterproductive. Like, I think you really just needed laser focus on the issue of touching someone without consent so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle. It's not like all those other things. Yes, it is also important that you not do those, but you had a very specific issue, and instead you're addressing a broader narrative, which I get the motivation to do that so that you can't then have a person come back and say, well, you didn't say that I couldn't walk around camp and just drop my pants and be like, hey, everybody, I'm the life of the party. Like, you didn't say that wasn't a part of the rules. But at the same time, like, when you're rattling off 47 things you can't do, don't expect someone that seems to be so oblivious about their behavior to pick up that you're referring to them. I think it would have been incredibly important to key in on the specific behavior. And you know what? Just pick one or two of the specific behaviors that Dan has done right in front of your cameras, clearly in multiple cases, and mention those so that it's not misconstrued who you're talking about, that hopefully Dan can get the message that it's him, and then have that follow-up meeting, which Probst doesn't say what was in the follow-up meeting, but have that follow-up meeting with just Dan and be like, listen, we were talking about just you. We addressed it to everybody, but we were talking about you because you, specifically Dan, have been this problem, and we've had complaints, and we will not accept any more complaints because you will be gone. I'll actually get to what I think should have been the remedy a little later. But am I crazy here? Is that too... Do you think it was important to have covered all those other topics too, just in case?
I mean, I can see maybe where they were coming from, but yeah, like, for all we know, the cast, this is a cast of newbies. Maybe they think, like, all right, this is just like a check-in at the merge, because now you have this group of people, the largest group, group of people together. Like, I mean, you think the one-on-one meeting is enough, but maybe he somehow thinks that actually happened with everyone. Maybe he thinks, like, okay, I'm too touchy, but, like, assumes that someone else isn't respecting bathroom breaks, which, like... What? But,
someone's following you out there for your aqua dump.
Yeah, like
I'm gonna go crap in the water. Oh, wait, no, I want to tag along with you.
I mean,
girls stand next to you while you poop.
Girls do go to the bathroom together, but not like that. It's to talk about people like Dan.
Exactly. Yeah, so, to me, not the best way to address the issue. And obviously, we don't have, like, a verbatim transcript of what was said. It just
read the transcript.
I would if I could. That mandate just doesn't seem to really address the behavior they're trying to address.
I mean, it was clearly ineffective.
Clearly.
It's just, sometimes it's hard to know, is that like is that just this guy is so willfully obtuse?
Right.
Were they so unclear? Is it a combination,
Exactly.
And it's probably a combination.
Again, this is not to give Dan credit in any way or to excuse him in any way. He should have known regardless. But at the same time, I think you could have conveyed that message better. And one of the reasons I feel like maybe that message wasn't delivered so well is the last point or the last group, I guess. It's not a person. It's a group that I want to get to. And that's production. Because we saw an extremely rare event. I don't ever recall it before, where we heard producers talking on camera.
Yeah, I certainly don't remember that ever happening.
Yeah, subtitled so you could tell exactly what they were saying. I mean, this is the stuff that always occurs in confessionals. The producers are talking to them, but they, of course, edit this part out. Instead, we got to see it. And what we got to see, which was, again, subtitled on the screen, was a producer saying, and this is a quote, if there are issues to the point where things need to happen, come to me and I will make sure that stops because I don't want anyone feeling uncomfortable. I just want to make sure it's not okay. I have a lot of problems with this because you've witnessed them being uncomfortable. You watched Missy and Kelly have this conversation. Yeah, I mean, we know all this footage exists. We know all the producers have like daily meetings about what's going on with the groups. They talk to probes. They talk to each other. So they've seen these people act out Dan's gropey hands in the shelter. They've seen Missy and Kelly talking about how terrible it is. It's a fucking open secret that this is happening. And then only in the middle of a confessional with Kelly breaking into tears do you decide this is the moment to intervene. This is when you're going to do something about it. You've seen a fucking whisper network in action. You watched all these women talking about how this man makes them feel uncomfortable, and they did it in entirely different ways. Some were clearly more uncomfortable with it than others. Some were joking about it, which doesn't mean, I want to emphasize, that it didn't bother them, because people deal with things differently. You could be horribly distraught about this, but be trying to laugh it off to make yourself feel better. And you're watching all these women cope with this, and only at this point in this confessional, and again, you've seen Kelly before, confront him directly so you know this bothers her. Now you're like, hey, you can talk to us about it. Motherfucker, it's not on her to do that. You know it exists. This is the point where you need to intervene, and you didn't. And that's a huge fucking failing. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think maybe the reason why it ended up sort of the way it is just, I don't want to say there's no precedent for it, because we know there is, because things have happened that have had, similarly bad consequences for the victims. However, it's been a very long time. This is a different production team. There hasn't been a precedent for removing someone from the game in this way. And I can get, and again, not saying it's like right or whatever, but I can sort of see from a producer standpoint being very reluctant to make that big, step and that big change. Especially when, again, Kelly shouldn't have been put in that position, but when you're hearing her say, no, you don't, she doesn't want that to happen, then it's like, are you going against that? And it's why they should have not asked, and then just made that call themselves, but, can't unsqueeze the toothpaste out of the tube or whatever.
Great analogy. If I could just address that point, because it's a good one, you're right. Generally, and I totally get this, the show is all about being hands-off, despite what you might want to believe about weird conspiracy theories, about idols and all that shit. Fine. In general, the show is hands-off. They let the players be themselves. There are super vague rules that they're essentially breaking all the time, like talking at tribal, blah, blah, blah. But we had a situation in Karamoan when Brandon was basically removed from the game. They didn't take him out. They pretended they did a voice vote. They went through this whole, charade. They were essentially removing him from the game because even though he hadn't fucking done it yet, it seemed like he might cross a line. And he got removed because all the staff there are men, as far as we know, and I'm pretty sure it was the case. I would bet money on it.
Right.
They recognize that, potential violence is a behavior that crosses a line. I think they didn't do it here because they're just not willing to see this as a line being crossed. And that's a massive fucking failure. You should really know at this point in your life, we covered the whole Me Too movement. You've got to know a line has already been crossed.
It's sort of the classic, oh, well, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that. It's everyone now, anytime there's any sort of story about, misconduct, people love to say oh, well, it's not like he's Harvey Weinstein. Looking at you, David Simon. They as if it's only, you could say the thing, it'd be like if with Brandon Hansen, it's well, it's not like he murdered someone.
Right. Yeah. He didn't actually cut someone with machete. Okay, but
the line can be before that. I will say, however, just to sort of, go on the other side, is a difference with the Brandon thing is that the tribe now, again, I don't know, we don't know what kind of meetings happened, but the tribe was at the challenge, hey, we're forfeiting we're not going to compete in this challenge. We're forfeiting because we need to get rid of Brandon, which like aggressively didn't happen here.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And we already covered some of the reasons why it wasn't allowed to happen here, but they did still feel the need to intervene in Caramoan because they recognized like, oh shit, we are approaching way too close to like a red line. And to me, this screams, it's not ingrained enough in the men that are out there that like persistent, unwanted physical contact is crossing a line. And, I want to believe that it's just, if they had some women out there, that would fix the issue and it would improve. But we have fucking evidence from this episode that it's not necessarily true.
Yeah. Which actually, sorry if you had more to say on that point.
I'll go back to it. You jump in.
I was just going to say, just to get back, I remembered something, speaking of the other women that I forgot to bring up, when we were talking about them earlier, is I think something that was just so heartbreaking is we have that confessional of Kelly talking about how, wow, to hear that it's not just her, that it's 5 other women, that how validating it is and that she's not crazy and she's not making too big of a deal about it. And that, I think a lot of it, could say that like that really can make such a difference, especially for the quote unquote like smaller instances of harassment where you're like, well, it's not like it was, it could have been worse. It's not like this. I don't deserve to feel, I don't deserve to tweet me too. I don't deserve that to like worry about it because it wasn't that big a deal. And then to have other people, other women, other people validate that for you is like, no, that was shitty. That did matter. And so she felt that. And then it was a lie. And that's fucking devastating. And that is why Elizabeth makes me sick and can fuck that apology. And all of this, like, people being like, we don't want to attack the others. And it's some people, Aubrey, are a little too forgiving, I think. I get wanting to be forgiving. I am someone who likes to see, good in people. But it's just... yeah, sure, it's in an extreme situation, but we've seen evidence that not everyone reacts that way. Some people know when there's the line and when it's time to act moral. And, Elizabeth, Missy, Lauren, I'll say them the most just because I think they had the most information, but certainly Tommy, Aaron, that applies to them too. Who the fuck knows what Dean knew, what was going on? Does anyone talk to him? It's possible
exactly.
They don't. But
in general, Dean knows what's going on, regardless of Survivor or otherwise.
They should know better. And yeah, okay, obviously no one should be tweeting death threats. I think it's absolutely fine to tweet at people and be like, you were wrong to do this, because you know what? Actions have consequences.
And to me, this was a case of the system not protecting people. And in this case, the system is the whole show apparatus. It's the production staff. It's the camera people. It's Probst himself. They've structured this episode in a way that gives the appearance that they were doing everything they could and they were protecting people. And I want to be clear, there has been progress. You mentioned the Ted and Gandia situation way back in Thailand. There was Hatch and Sue and All Stars. The way they dealt with it this time was better, but that's the lowest of fucking bars.
Right.
And it's it is progress. It's painfully slow progress, but it's progress. And I just feel the disclaimers wanted to make you feel like the show was on the side of the victims here, which they were to an extent, and I feel like they were making an effort, but it's not the right effort. You don't put the onus on Kelly and the other women to do shit about it. At best, Kelly going to tell Dan, hey, stop, you're making me uncomfortable. That's a peer telling him to stop. And she did, as I mentioned, an excellent job of that, I thought. Clearly it didn't sink in with Dan, also Dan. The producers telling him to stop is someone in authority doing it. A person in authority telling you to stop has much greater weight than another player of the season. It's a stronger message. Like, having the players deliver that message to you is forcing them to put their own games at risk, which was explicitly stated in this episode and several other times this season, and it's fucking wrong. And it's only ever going to be done by women. Yes, there are people that would be like, oh God, production interfered too much. This is the case where you have to. It shouldn't have gotten to the point where they had to debate what to do about Dan. It needs to be out of their hands. Like, it can't be a strategy decision, because the game encourages some horrific behavior and encourages people to accept, promote, like, continue on, align with people that do shitty things, because then those people become attractive because they're beatable and unlikable. So rather than doing that, you need to fucking eliminate that possibility and just pull him from the game. Like, what they should have done was, after Kelly had that first conversation, immediately follow up with their own, being like, just so you know, we heard Kelly's complaint. That's also a complaint from us. She's right. If you touch her again without her consent, you're gone. And the fact that they even let it become a decision of the players is a massive fucking failing on their part. Yes, I am happy that the show has done better in this case than in previous cases, but I don't think
they didn't do as well as they think they did.
Right. And I don't want to totally condemn them, because I do think they are making a conscious effort. And I think, you know, it wasn't perfect, but Probst not letting Dan just brush aside the issue at tribal council is good. I don't think he hammered on it quite in the way that he should have. But again, I'll take it. It's imperfect. It's a little sloppy. It could be better, but at least we're trending on the line towards better. And that's what I need. I need progress.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, it's fucking crushing to have watched these women play this game and be put in this place. Like, this situation is not going to happen to Tommy. Tommy is never going to face something like this.
Right.
Aaron is not going to go through this. Why is it that we're totally fine with being like, hey, Kelly, well, sorry you had to go through that, but shrug, you're a woman. I guess it's just going to happen. You've got to be the one that steps forward and says what you want to have happen. No, she doesn't. The show does.
And I've seen takes from people who think that the second episode, like, put Dan in a, what's the word? In like a more like, in the light of him being the victim, and that it put Elizabeth and Missy in like a positive light somehow, and that Janet was in the wrong. Now, I don't agree with that, because I'm confused. Like, I don't know what you're watching then if you think that.
Yes,
but
I also don't agree.
But also, the fact that was in question means, like, I got something is like, I mean, I don't know if it's just people confusing how the game is going with what the edit is, because, like, the show can't make them not target Janet, you know? I don't know.
Right.
But it does show that that's even being considered by people who aren't like, oh, but that's true. Like, we should view Elizabeth in a good light, you know, mean that something was off, but it's also like, if the edit was painting them that way, you'd feel that way about them.
Yeah.
And you didn't.
To me, this was very much the edit showing you all the evidence, both sides, as it were, to let you know, like, look, Dan did do these very shitty things. Missy and Kelly did have a conversation where they said they felt super uncomfortable. Kelly had a fucking confessional and talked to a producer and felt uncomfortable. We specifically intervened with Dan because we'd been made aware of this issue. Like, they also showed the other side where Elizabeth agrees to play up an incident that she's not actually bothered, or a set of incidents that she's not actually bothered by, people joking it off and playing it off for game purposes, which is shitty. You're just getting the full picture. And I don't think that somehow paints Dan in a better light. It just shows that some people were less bothered by his behavior than others.
Yeah. And like, I think it showed the people who were less bothered also in a bad light. Not because they were less bothered, but, you know, right. How it was handled.
Because they discounted those who were bothered by it.
Well, he was always nice to me, so he can't possibly be nice to be bad to other people.
Let's transition. Let's go to the shining points of light from this episode, shall we?
Some of whom we've already lost, which is so sad.
Okay, so maybe we start with Jamal then, and we save the shining beacon of hope.
Yeah, because we can merge that into a eulogy for his game.
Sure, why not? All right, so Jamal in this episode, of course, went home, and he had a quote after Aaron's quote that I mentioned earlier, where Aaron says that he would have heard about it. Jamal says, and again, quote, "This whole idea of if this was actually an issue, then I would have heard about it and he would have heard about it. That's exactly what happens in the real world, guys. That's exactly what happens in the real world when a woman brings up a charge and people want to negate whether or not I think that's supposed to be debate whether or not it's legitimate, not negate. They say if it was such a big issue, then they would have brought it up last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We are not entitled to know things just because we're men and just because we're in power." Jamal. You know what? It's funny because you and I did not plan to clap there.
Oh, I was snapping, to be clear, but same energy.
Shit. That's right. Roughly the same wavelength. My wife and I, immediately after his speech, were legitimately applauding. We're like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, same. I mean, I said, the group of friends, as soon as he even just started with no, we were like, yeah!
Yes, exactly. As soon as the first word is no, like, yes, don't let that shit die.
Thank you, Jamal. And I know, and that's the thing, and people have been like, wow, Jamal is getting such a weird edit. It's I think Jamal is just a complex person and shows that people aren't perfect, because yes, he knows this, but he still had maybe your smaller issues, with Kelly and the fire or whatever, but that's also that's where I think the they're in the rain and they're hungry, can come in. It's things where people aren't at their best at all times. You can't expect that of people, but they can still stand up and speak out when something this major is going on.
And good people can make mistakes. And not only that, but after making that mistake, Jamal, for the most part, seemed to legitimately listen and absorb the lessons that he was given by the women. That is the reaction you need to have. Yeah. You don't go wildly on the defensive and be like, well, actually.
I mean, it's the same as when Jamal was talking to Jack, that Jack really, so many people, are going to be like, well, no, I couldn't possibly be, instead he's like, okay, wow, you're so right. I didn't realize that. I'm sorry, I will not do that again. Now I know.
Yep.
And become a better person for it.
Yes, and you give people the room to make mistakes and to forgive them in those sorts of mistakes.
Right, milder,
Right, exactly. I mean, that people are allowed to learn and grow. But I have to say, holy shit, in the moment, that was a remarkably eloquent and well-stated message from Jamal. I've had freaking 24 hours to think about this, and I'm sure I could not have spouted it that eloquently.
He's so deliberate in the way he speaks. It's very admirable. I don't know how he's able to organize that all in his brain before he starts talking, but yeah, he's very good at it.
Right. And again, very little sleep, very little food. So, yes, we can see some of the worst sides of humanity when these people are starving and overtired. But at the same time, Jamal, in this speech at least, was firing on all cylinders. So, man, what an ally. Bravo. Seriously, I want to clap again. He was so good.
Even if, everything shitty that hadn't happened, this would have still been a bummer because Kelly and Jamal went home. but then it was just the worst possible thing instead. Like, it would have been like, bummer, but wow, good going, guys. We'll see who's gonna be on top now. And instead it's just like, everything is awful. Do we like this show anymore? What's happening? Are we okay for watching this? What's wrong with me? Yeah, just a whole ass mess.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get to the game implications of these votes because I think there's, at least something to address there. It's reasonable from a game perspective, but I mean, it was very nice to see Jamal's arc over these past few episodes where like he can be a teacher, he can be an ally who makes mistakes, like he's an imperfect one. And to me that resonates because I've definitely gone down that growth path. I mean, like obviously I try and occasionally I'm going to fuck up and it's like, shit, I feel legitimately bad when I fuck up because that's never my intent. So like I totally related to him on that level and, him speaking up, I want to believe that I would have done the exact same thing. I feel like in this situation, I probably would have. I'm generally good at anticipating when I would not rock the boat. But yeah, I just want to applaud him for in that moment, the instant reaction, just not letting Aaron get away with that bullshit. And it was beautiful to watch. And I hope that Aaron has since, I get the impression that he might have started to learn something from this incident. But I mean, it's hard for people like Jamal, like myself, like anybody to unlearn some of the lessons that like the American culture has been trying to make you absorb for most of your life. So I get it. People make mistakes, but it's nice when you can see someone perform this well as an ally. So once again, bravo, Jamal. You are a gift and we are sad to have lost you, I guess. I don't know. I phrased that poorly. See, I'm demonstrating I can't do it in the moment. How hard it is to,
exactly. to talk. Yeah. Now, King Jamal, if, there are 3 not post-merge people I'm willing to see again from this cast, and he is one of them.
Yeah. And let's get to one of the others because we've saved it for the very end. Janet, fucking goddess, Florida woman. Janet. I never thought I would see a headline of Florida woman selflessly fights for justice, and yet here we are.
She is originally from New Jersey, so.
Yeah, fuck you. Taking Janet as one of our own.
So passionate.
Yeah, exactly. I've adopted her. She is mine. She is, and I was thinking of this today, and it's very dumb, and that's why I like it. Instead of Janet being the lifeguard, she's now the guardian of life. Because I eternally stand. I love Janet so much. Like, it's been building.
Like, we already loved Janet. That's thing.
What I was just gonna say.
That's
it's like,
nuts.
This was not just in this moment I love Janet. It was like, I've been enjoying Janet throughout this season. Like, I've been blown away by this person that, had I just looked at a picture and a bio, I'd have been like, yeah, no thanks, not interested. But man, have I enjoyed her. And this was just the freaking icing on the cake. It was so awesome. She was amazing.
She went from like, wow, Janet is like in my like top 3 of players to, is Janet the best person in the world?
Yeah, exactly. Can we somehow make her the Pope? Is
it too early for canonization? That's what it's called, right? John and I are the least religious people.
Are you not a devout Catholic?
We don't know how. I did go to a Jesuit school, but I got a C+ in religions of the world.
And it's honestly probably better than I would have done.
We had to take theology.
All right, so let me read you what new Survivor goddess Janet said, and this is again the quote from Wiggler's article. Initially, my take on Dan was that he's an old school guy who never really thought about what he was doing, being physical, an arm around the shoulder, stuff I would do with my lifeguards. I'm a physical person. At the same time, I cannot ignore these girls. Mm-hmm. On the off chance Dan is totally innocent he's going to be devastated. It's a tricky thing to have 100% proof. You're never going to get it. You know, allow me to interject something here.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you might not have all of the information. And yet, it can be possible to believe someone.
The devil, you say?
Yes. So, yes, as far as we know, she never did really have 100% proof. But she believed and put concern for the well-being of others ahead of her own gameplay strategy. Like, I think she legitimately would have stuck with Dan. Like, yeah, I don't think
she was arguably more aligned with Dan than any of the others, you know. Yes. Certainly the former Lyro people. Like, yeah, sure, they were swapped, but like, you know, it was divided. He could have, if things had flipped a different way, he could have already been gone instead of Jason. And why don't we live in that timeline?
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, I think she genuinely had a plan that she was going to be voting with Dan, but this came up and it superseded that for her in her mind. To me, the reason this is so amazing is that Janet is not the type, and again, this is probably the exception now, but Janet is not the type that would ever be brought back. She is an older woman. She's if not the oldest, she was the second oldest this season.
Yeah, I think Tom was older, but not by much, by like a year.
Right. She's just not the archetype that they're going to bring back over and over again. She has essentially one shot at Survivor and somehow managed to say, you know what, this might be my only shot at ever playing this game, at ever winning this game. And so I'm going to make my path to winning that much harder because you know what? It's more important to me to make these people that I've known for 2 weeks feel safe and respected and heard and seen. And goddamn, she's amazing.
She's the best. I love her. She is too old to be, or you're too old to be, for her to be your mom, but she could be my mom.
How dare you? She could be like a teen mom or something. I don't actually remember.
Actually, wait, how old are you? Yeah, I guess that could work. You know, that could happen. It's probably it's, you know, more plausible with me, but fine. You can be, you know, she accidentally had you as a teen and then finally when like things settled down and she found a different husband.
Gotcha. So I was the oops and you were the planned. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. At the very least, she is our queen mother. She is, yes. She rules us all. The one sad point, and I hate to rain on the parade here, Janet is fucking doomed now. Like, she won't win. Like, Gandia didn't win in Thailand. Shireen didn't win Worlds Apart. Zeke didn't win Game Changers. These people who, you know, do the right thing or get wronged in some way, they don't win. Like, the show doesn't script you a happy ending, and it's fucking devastating that I'm going to be watching the rest of this season, like, watching Janet play out the string before she's eventually axed, and it's just so sad. And I tweeted this during the show, like, if they want to provide her with an idol every week, I'm fucking fine with that. Like, I'm not going to complain.
Janet's the new band. Let's make it happen.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if you want to complain, oh my God, production interference, fuck it. Production interference. Like, hide it in Janet's bag. I don't give a shit.
Like, you waited too long to interfere, so now you have to do this.
You got to course correct, right? This is the makeup call. Like, yeah. Oh, you're not a big basketball fan. I feel like there's makeup calls in other sports.
There can definitely in baseball pitches. Yeah.
Exactly. So,
yeah, for sure.
You know what? Give it the makeup call. Give Janet the idols. Keep her in the fucking game. Like, rig the immunity challenges. Like, oh, okay, now we're gonna do a, toss a fucking, lifesaver onto a thing challenge and then perform CPR. Oh my God, who's gonna win? Could be anybody.
Who can spot the shark? Yeah, what's frustrating is it can't even swim, it can't even just be swimming because fucking Elizabeth.
I know. I had to add some elements to the challenge that would make it specifically Janet.
Maybe like a sand running, you know, like I know in junior guards they have to do that at least.
Or she's Floridian now, like make an alligator wrestling competition. Like, I know she's not technically ours, but she's one of us now. So she at least stands.
I don't know how long she's lived there. Might have been a while. You know?
That's what I'm saying. You never know. So yeah, Janet probably doomed, and it's sad, but bravo. Like, you will forever be remembered, Janet, because you are a queen and a champion, and we are blessed to have you in our lives.
Indeed.
All right, let's do some quick gameplay discussion.
Hey!
The lesser point of this episode. Someone suggested to me on Twitter, like, oh yeah, I mean, they took out Kelly and Jamal, and, it was Kelly who was the victim and Jamal who was saying we should believe her, but at the same time, they were both legitimate threats. You know what? It can be fucking two things.
Yep.
That's exactly what this was. Like, yes, Missy and Kelly were going after each other. They both decided to ignore the Dan thing. They were going to pursue their game goals instead. As I said earlier, the Dan thing shouldn't have been an issue. It should have been taken care of by production, but whatever. We're moving on anyway, and I don't think it's at all wrong to target Kelly. She's a very good player and a totally reasonable target. I'm assuming you agree with that.
Yeah, it's just such a bummer. On that even just on that level, it's such a bummer. I was so high on her. I was like, I really thought she could have been the winner, which would have been awesome for a lot of reasons. And girl, like, I know you have said, actually, I believe, like, oh, she had no reason to believe, that'd be her, her to play the idol. But if you have the need to ask Lauren, are we good? Then you're suspicious, you have a gut feeling, and you have two idols. And you know how to find them now. Just play it.
I mean,
and
that is.
Here's the other thing, too. It's like, yeah, even if it's a waste, like, you're voting for Dan. Like, there's a very good chance that, gets him sent home, and isn't, Rob Sesternino said it on Know-It-Alls that, like, no one can ever say Survivor is scripted, try to make those claims, because if Survivor is scripted, Kelly plays the idol and Dan goes home.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, and it's super satisfying, and everyone's, or like he goes out unanimously, but whatever.
Right, that's what I was getting at earlier. Like, Survivor is not going to give you the happy ending. Like, it's not going to happen. It's sad, but it doesn't generally happen in real life. It's not going to happen in Survivor.
Yep. And then Jamal, is that the worst Island of the Idols? What the actual like, I know before we were sort of like, oh yeah, it's fun, it's playful, and then like, even, gosh, whichever, the time when I was podcasting was Matt, so it was like the swap, it might have been the Nora time, where we're like, what are they, like, they seem to very quickly run out of challenge ideas, and we're like, what are they gonna do? How is the lesson, don't grab the thing?
Exactly, like, in every season of Survivor, they have generally tried to throw in some new wrinkle. So your suggestion to him is, hey, don't expect that a new wrinkle is going to be positive, even though history suggests that it definitely will be. What the fuck is that lesson?
Yeah, and even the like, oh, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. How often even does something like, the only time that is like, wow, it seems like I'm on top and my plan is going great. Like, that is very different from like a tangible, like, wow, I found an idol without a clue. Like, I guess it's too good to be true. Like, yeah, sure, sometimes it's a fake idol. Sometimes it's an idol.
Exactly. I don't get, like, if anything, that was just a weird ass punishment for Jamal. And then the note thing. So bizarre. At the very least, like, if you're going to do that, give him access to whatever method you use to print a note on there so that it looks fucking legitimate.
Yeah. Sure, there's no pencils on the island, but they know he went to an island.
Yep.
And they know what pencil is, and they know what their tree mail looks like.
The only suggestion that I saw that maybe could have worked is, and I would love to credit the person, I'm totally sorry that I'm not here because I don't remember who you were, but someone said, if you had just drawn a crude map on there and pretended it was like a clue to where the idol was. Cool, you could have done that. It wouldn't have helped you much, but I guess you could have done that.
Just the stupidest, the worst. It was only made things bad for, and it's not like, oh, he played it poor. Like, he did the best he could, even had a good explanation for it being in pencil, but it's like, what are you gonna do?
It was somehow dumber than a fake idol. Not through any fault of Jamal's.
Right, just the concept.
Yes. And fake idols, as we've continually discussed on this show, are already pretty dumb and useless as is. This was somehow clearing that exceptionally, or like going underneath that exceptionally low bar. Like, oof, so bad. I do think, again, with Jamal though, totally legitimate target. The guy's smart, he's charming, seems like a legit threat.
He also doesn't have a lot of allies. He seems to be kind of on the outside for whatever, he's on the side that voted for Dan, and is arguably the most threatening among that group. I was shocked that they were splitting the votes between him and Karishma. I'm like, we trying to get rid of Karishma? Second after the merge? That's who I have no idea, like, it's weird, even though there was like an 8-5 thing, like, I feel like I don't really know what, like, if there's like, is there that an actual alliance of 8? Like, I just feel like that's not gonna stick. 'Cause, like, are they really gonna be picking off Karishma, Nora, and Janet? Like, yes, I could see it was but like, I just don't see those being the next 3 episodes. It's just weird jumble of things.
Well,
how did Nora get in on that? Like, when they did the split, like, it's just...
You've given us the perfect lead-in. Hey. Let's predict what's going to happen in this next episode. We've already been teased that there are 2 boots coming our way. So you get 2 picks, get them in order, you may go.
How about you go? Because I did not prepare.
Cool. Well, you're not going to have much time to prepare because I have very little explanation. I think Janet goes first. I don't think this gets dragged out. And then I think second, Aaron. I think there's going to be, for whatever reason, they've already seen Aaron win 2 challenges. Maybe he wins a third. And then the first one he loses, they might be like, you know what? We got to take out the challenge thread. And Aaron goes home. Janet, then Aaron. What do you got in your 14 seconds of preparation I just gave you?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it would be a bit of a cop-out to just say what you said.
Also, you'd probably be wrong. If
although,
this season's history is any indication.
We did finally, I forget who it was, but wasn't there a thing that someone had picked Jamal for first, but someone had also picked Jamal for second, so if Jamal went at any point, the streak was over?
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Who betrayed our perfect game?
It wasn't me, I know that.
I have no idea. It might have been me.
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm not willing to pull it up. That sounds like effort. I am going to try to be positive, but not too optimistic, because I'm not going to predict Dan, but I'm also not going to predict Janet, because I don't want to. So I'm going to say Karishma, because they were targeted, they put the split vote on her, so apparently they think she's worth voting out. And I mean, it seems lazy, but yeah, I mean, Aaron, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to say that too.
Okay, we're going to skip the advice segment this week because A, we don't really need to fill much time, and B, just kind of feels tonally inappropriate. So.
Yeah. See, we don't want to.
That's right. Also that. So I don't even remember who's podcasting for you next week. Somebody, I don't know. In the meantime, you can always find our content on the website at purplerockpodcast.com. You can find us tweeting. The show account is at Purple Rock Pod. And you are, of course,
at Purple Rock Emma. And also, I did go check, and it's you. It's supposed to be you and Andy next week.
Oh, shit. You would think I would know that I was doing
You would think that would be known, so.
And yet, if you know me, you would know that I would not know.
So you know, they know that we know that they know. Monica and Chandler are dating.
This is completely new information. All right. That seems like as good a point as any to wrap this thing up. And let's maybe play music, Shrug?